Right.
And it wasn't exactly a coincidence, but she caused it.
Right.
Still.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody to the Audit and Finance Committee meeting for the City of Independence City Council for June the 4th, 2025. It's 3 o'clock and we're in the IUC building, room 117. And all members of the committee are present, including council members Perkins and Wiley and myself. And let's see, we got Lisa Reynolds here and Jeremy Cover and Charlie DeSell and we got Andrew Frazier and we got I'm losing it. Nancy Cooper, I'm losing it. Melissa Carrera, and I'm not sure who this young lady is, so I'll let you introduce her, Melissa.
Sure. She is Angie Hughes from PFM Asset Management, and she's here to present today on our investment portfolio and how it's been performing.
Great. That's super. And I see Christina Heinen here and other staff. So we are off and running. I think everybody is here that needs to be here except for Zach, and he'll be coming in shortly. First thing up is approval of the minutes from March 19 meeting.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'll make a motion for approval unless there's any amendments by the other committee members.
I second.
No amendments? I don't have anything either, so we'll say that that's approved and by acclamation, so we're good to go there. So that first thing up today is our review of the animal shelter. Andrew Frazier's here to do that for us. So Andrew, like you're queued up, take it away.
Alrighty, I am Andrew Frazier. I'm the city's management analyst, and I had the privilege of reviewing the animal shelter, so we'll dive right in. Okay. Hold on just a second. So my methodology here, so basically the objective here was kind of assess the effectiveness and efficiency of shelter processes, that sort of thing. Interviewed key stakeholders, looked at documentation, looked at data, and it did that all in accordance with the generally accepted government auditing standards. So the background. I don't know if everybody is familiar with the background of the animal shelter, but it's kind of unique. So back in 2009, the city and county entered into a partnership for a new state-of-the-art animal shelter facility. So at the time, the city had land, but didn't have the funding. The county had the funding, but didn't have the land. So they entered into that agreement, a partnership. And the city would manage the operation. And after a 30-year period, the facility ownership would transfer over to the city. So by 2012, the facility was completed. However, the county's legislature had changed. So did their priorities. So instead of honoring what they had initially agreed upon, they went with Great Plains SPCA. That triggered lengthy court battle, eventually, ultimately, ending in Great Plains running the operation, facility owned by the county, and our animal control. We, the city, operate animal control out of there. Fast forward a little bit to 2018. Great Plains indicated they needed additional funding beyond what they recently negotiated. Early 2019, they provided a 6-month notice of intention to withdraw from the agreement. The city then re-entered into discussions with the county for operations. Now, despite ongoing discussions since then, no new contract has been finalized. So it's a very interesting background with the facility. Oh, so when the city took over, obviously mission statements were created, operations plans were developed, that sort of thing. So the mission is to ensure the safety and well-being of both people and animals in the community by fostering a culture of responsible pet ownership. Pretty good mission statement, highlights values of the city. Some of the operations are obviously adoptions, intake, animal control, vet services, etc. And with that comes programs as well. Some of the key programs offered are the Pet Food Pantry, Operation Litterless, which I can get into, a Community Cat Clinic focused on trap, neuter, return, or TNR, and other community outreach initiatives. Any questions on that? Okay.
Andrew,
Yes.
I'm not sure, Christina, you might be able, I'm going to just throw this out there. What kind of funding, additional funding was Great Plains asking for?
That I don't know. Yeah.
So I don't remember the exact amounts. I remember it being significant, enough that I know the county at the time was not only paying the debt on the building, essentially the mortgage, they were also giving Great Plains an additional $500,000 a year. We were also giving essentially what was the same amount we would for the shelter operations now, right around 600,000. I wanted to say that they wanted us to bump that up significantly, closer to $1 million, because they were saying they were in the red every single year while operating.
And Andrew, you say you're gonna get into this operation,
Yeah, I can.
what did you say?
I have a. Well, in the full review, I explain it in great detail, but I can briefly just describe it later.
Okay, that'd be great.
So the facility. So when the city took over operation, the building wasn't in the best of shape. Needed a new roof. A lot of leakage. A lot of the hot water heaters didn't work, fire suppression system issues, that sort of thing. And since then, over time, this stuff has been repaired. There's still some leaks. There's still at least one hot water heater that doesn't work, but the fire suppression system does work. So over time, those maintenance issues got resolved. Obviously, the building itself can be a limitation when you're at capacity. It's just inherent. Any questions on facility type questions?
So are you saying at this point that from your findings that most of the maintenance issues, all that have been resolved and
Not all of it, but a lot of it, yes.
enough to where we're not in a safety issue?
Right, and I think the most recent thing that was replaced was the HVAC system, and we, the city, paid for it and got reimbursed later from the county.
I remember hearing about that.
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman,
Yes.
I think that's part of the problem with us running this shelter without a contract for defined, I don't know, who's in charge of what maintenance and the like. So that's part of the problem that we have.
Yeah, I don't know where, I mean, it's obvious, but their level of priority is, you know what I mean? Regarding our shelter. So policies and procedures. The Missouri Department of Agriculture sets the regulations for animal shelters. They operate within those confines. Obviously, the personnel are governed by the city personnel policy. A lot of the adoption and rehoming strategies are based off, are nationally recognized entities. They use those models for those strategies. And then there's a whole bunch of policies on intake, residency, vaccinations, animal control. And I go into great detail on all of those in the final review. So if you have any questions on those, I can absolutely dig into that. Some of the intake data. there's quite a bit of data that the shelter monitors and records. I realize this is a lot of data being thrown at you. Some notable points, 2023, there was an increase driven by, an intake increase driven by strays and field sources. There's a lot of rising in the dumped animal category. Obviously, those numbers aren't the same or as high as the other numbers, but definitely an increase in that section, which may indicate maybe some retraining or some sort of outreach, to kind of inform the community on that. It's also broken down by species. Clearly, dogs are winning in that category, which again may indicate a need for targeted population control or something of that nature.
So, from a non-animal person, when you say targeted population control, what would you envision that to look like?
Basically, I guess more outreach. It's hard to say really. I think with having, being a pet owner myself, just being responsible, I think, and that education piece, I don't know that everybody gets that, right? There's no class in school on responsible pet ownership. And I know the shelter does a good outreach job. It's just obviously doesn't reach everybody.
Gotcha. Okay.
And again, I go into further detail in the main review. Volunteer data. This one was pretty interesting. 2020 was an incredible year for a lot of reasons, but I think a positive for COVID was that there was a ton of volunteer hours. Wow, like an incredible amount. But also notably, in 2024, there was quite a bit of a drop as well. And that really piqued my interest. I started asking around down there at the shelter, and basically what it boiled down to, I guess some of the volunteers felt siloed whenever they would come and volunteer their services. And they would like to come and volunteer, but didn't like that feeling, so they chose not to. Yeah, and I guess that's just unfortunate, but I'm sure there's a lot of reasons why that is, but yeah, that's part of the reason why it dipped down in numbers. Any questions on that?
Did you interview any of the volunteers to that
Yeah,
question?
yeah.
And so they.
And I didn't, obviously, and it's just a few, so.
Sure. Okay, good.
Foster data, as well as previously in 2020, there was a great deal of fostering. Again, another positive byproduct of COVID. Just found that interesting. But yeah, it's general uptick last year, so moving in a positive trend.
All right, I'm going to be real ignorant here. When you say fostering animals, what does that?
So, like members of the community taking these animals in and holding them until they find placement or what have you.
Not adopting them, just
Right.
taking them for
Yep.
for a while.
Taking care of them, yep, until they can be adopted.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah,
I
a lot
mean,
of-
Are you volunteering?
no, but that's
Christina can get
fascinating.
you on the list.
I appreciate that, but I'll pass. It's just fascinating to me, the uptake in that in 2020 due to
I know,
COVID.
right?
That's just crazy.
people wanted to help, I guess, during COVID.
Who were home.
Adoption data, again, general upward trend for adoptions. We also included off-site adoptions and those numbers here. Not much else to say on this. Any questions? All right. Here's some outcome data, which is also tracked by the animal shelter. That adoption line is obviously the same as last slide, but yeah, one of the things to note here is the steady live release rate and reduced owner returns. I mean, that suggests successful rescue, care, and community engagement efforts. And again, it's broken down by species. Any questions on any of these? Again, I go into much more detail in the full review. There's also some clinic data on TNR, trap, neuter, return. You can see a slight downward trend last year, and maybe that suggests the program's working. If you're not catching as many, it's also broken down kind of by like funding, like grant sources. OLL, that's Operation Litterless, and yeah. So you were asking about Operation Litterless. So this is a program that basically aims to help underserved members of the community. Basically, if you meet these qualifications, it's essentially free to get this done, to neuter spay or neuter your animal. And there's a lot of requirements, but it's basically underserved. Moving on. This was another fascinating topic to dive into, the length of stay. This actually got me going to different local organizations around here. So for us here, it's broken down by species. So your average length of stay last year for dogs was 36.2, cats 24.7, and I think right now it's at 38. So for example, the average length of stay impacts the pricing model. The first day would cost $75, and each additional day after that would be $25. Now you take, it should be 37, but I'm messed up on my calculation here. 37 times 25 plus 75 equals 1,000, not 1,025. Again, I messed up on my calculation. Basic math is hard. So that puts average cost per animal about $1,000. And when I reached out to these other entities, this was one of my questions. Like, what does this look like for you? What is your average cost per animal? I went to the Midwest Animal Rescue, and they told me they divide the total direct costs to include full payroll, facility expenses, IT, all of that, by the total number of animals taken during the year. And for them last year, that was, for their average cost per animal, that was $305 for Midwest Animal Rescue. I also spoke with KC Pet Project. I spoke to their finance, and they told me they don't even track this. They don't even track average cost per animal. They acknowledge that there's multiple ways to do this for sure, but they don't do it. They do track average length of stay. For them, that's 20 days. I also spoke with the Humane Society of Greater Kansas City. Their average cost per animal was $410. But then again, their average length of stay is 13 days. So I guess the point is there's multiple ways to do this, to calculate this cost or average. Managing fixed versus variable costs is going to come into play. Just I guess the point is there's multiple ways to do this, and there's no national standard on how to do this. Any questions?
So it sounds like, I mean, the goal would be to reduce the number of days of stay.
Right.
I mean, that's how some of those other places have reduced their costs.
Yep.
So did you look into that question relative to?
How they were able to manage the lower.
Right,
I think there's multiple factors. Their outreach, I think, may be better or worse. It's hard to say, really. Location even, could drive that. It's just hard to say.
Is it okay if I add to this? Is that okay? So sheltering is expensive, and I think, the more animals you have in your care, the more this goes down. But also, this is dependent on like puppies. If you intake a lot of puppies, they're more expensive because we're doing vaccinations and the gold standard for length of stay, the goal is 14 days. And I have a lot of ideas about some of the things that would help, but I think one of the things that some of the other shelters do is they have full-time staff that works on reuniting animals with their owners. They're on the internet all day. They're taking pictures of the dogs that come into intake to make sure dogs don't end up in the shelter. Because once they end up in the shelter, they're expensive. So it would be nice if we could bring our volunteer numbers back up.
That'll certainly help.
Yeah, because I think some of this stuff we could get help from volunteers. And one of the things that would be great is if we could have help with things like that. Not every volunteer wants to walk dogs they don't know. But if we can get a group that's super active to do some of the stuff before the animals get there, it would be helpful.
That didn't make sense to me. What do you mean that to get a group to do something before they get there?
Being proactive about it.
Yeah, like someone who's on the internet all day looking at lost dogs in Independence and helping them reunite with their owners.
So we would have received them by that time, right?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, there's a lot of lost animal Facebook pages that are, I think, a little unorganized right now. If we could get some volunteer help to really work on that, I think we could do a better job reuniting animals. But yes, sometimes maybe they do end up at the shelter, and we could have volunteers help reunite them with their owners.
Okay.
So I wholeheartedly agree. And we have looked several times at having that. We've also looked at having, an ArcGIS map where it's pinpointed for where the animal was lost, their photo, and help people determine, if an animal is found versus lost, and help reunite them by where they were found. There's also, and you get into it in the report about fostering and increasing our fostering. We have, over the years, not had as much fostering for larger dogs as like Humane Society of Greater Kansas City. One of the reasons why their length of stay is so low is because they are primarily foster based. And when you're calculating length of stay, you don't include the time the animal's in foster. You only include when they're actually on site. So if you can quickly get an animal into foster, you can lower that length of stay and therefore the cost. However, then there's liabilities that are attached to fostering an animal, and that liability stays with the city. So we have to be very careful about who goes out into foster. So I mean, there's, as Andrew said, there's tons of factors that play into this. And having that help with that community outreach is just key.
Recommendations here at the tail end. So to kind of address that siloed issue or volunteer issue, the first two recommendations kind of hit on that, with organizational culture, collaboration, and strengthening volunteer and staff engagement by, including volunteers maybe in the decision-making process. That'll give them ownership over what they're doing. That'll help out for sure. Ongoing training that aligns volunteers and staff with shelter's mission, policies, and best practices. And I just found out that the shelter has recently, I guess, partnered with Best Friends Animal Society to embed a training officer. I think that's going to help kind of with some of those issues. I think that's great. Optimize intake and adoption process. Obviously, continue to refine that marketing and digital outreach. I think they do a good job. I ended up getting a dog from there, and I've never had a dog in my life. So, thanks to Kim as well. But yeah, emphasizing success stories and making those connections with the community. And I know they do that. I've seen it. With expand and sustain feral animal management programs, the funding sources, like those grant opportunities for TNR. I know they're probably competitive, but continuing to approach those and be proactive towards those, I think are going to help for the trap, neuter, return, Operation Litterlist, all of that. Continue to collaborate with community partners, of course. Monitor and manage financial sustainability. Of course, continue to conduct those detailed cost analysis and adjust fee structures, balancing affordability versus operational costs, that sort of thing. And I know they do that. Investing in facility improvements. This is the tricky one. It's hard to make a recommendation on this when we don't have that capacity. But like I said, we the city replaced the HVAC and got reimbursed later. I don't know if that's an option to continue pursuing that method. I don't know that the county liked that. But or creating a policy or plan that addresses it specifically, But yeah, there's definitely opportunity to make facility improvements. And then, of course, leverage data and metrics, using, key performance indicators to make informed decisions, that sort of thing. So, in conclusion, I went out there and helped with LEAD. There's definitely a demonstrated commitment to animal welfare. I got that sense when I was there. I got that sense when I was there getting my dog. Of course, there's ongoing challenges, as with anything, but that also means there's opportunity to make improvements. So that's all I have. Any questions?
Have any questions?
I don't have any questions. I have some thoughts. Is that okay?
Yep.
Is that okay? So first, I want to be sensitive because we have a really great staff, and working in the shelter is really difficult work. It's physically hard. It's mentally hard. They see hard things, and so, but I feel like we should always strive to do better. I think there are things that we can do. My thought is we put together this animal welfare committee that's going to meet in June. And could we parlay that into a solid group of volunteers that can start doing more for the shelter? And there are some shelters who have 501Cs that work next to them, like Friends of the Shelter. And I'm not sure if our shelter has ever done that, but I'm wondering if that's a possibility, if that's something we can work on sort of with this animal welfare committee. Have we ever had something like that? We have.
It was before my time, but I
Okay.
know that there was a Friends of the Animal Shelter, and then that fund ended up being rolled over into the Truman Heartland Community
That's what
Foundation Fund.
Yes.
I don't know why, because it was before my time. I
Okay.
just know that it did exist.
Okay. So that is something I think that could be worked on. And so I like that idea. And then there is a group out of the University of Florida, and they do something called Maddie's Million Pet Challenge. And they will come to your shelter. They're experts on sheltering and vet care, and they will give you an assessment, look over the paperwork. And I think we might be able to do that for free. This group is coming to Kansas City Pet Project in September to give an assessment. So I think we could ask them to come at the same time. It's a really good group. They look at your facility design, intake policies, housing enrichment, population management. They look at your TNR program, public policy and enforcement programs, budgeting, management of employees and volunteers, physical and behavioral wellness. So I'm asking if we can look into that. I think you have to apply so that we can get some recommendations on how we can do better. That's it. Thanks.
Okay, sounds good, thank you. All right, if there's nothing else, Andrew, thank you, appreciate that report, and we'll look forward to getting the full report and be able to dive into that. All right, thank you. Next up is our investment performance review,
So I'm going to turn this over to Angie Hughes again from PFM Asset Management. I know on the phone she also has her colleague Chris Harris, who will be assisting in the presentation. So we will let them get started. Right now she's just getting through. We have two presentations up there right now. One is through year end 2024. She's going to present through first quarter 2025.
I was wondering which one of those we were gonna do, so.
Except Nat's frozen. Oh, there. Maybe I was just too fast for it. Sorry. We wanted to give you. Is the March 31st one not in there? Or did I go too far? This one still says December. Is the March one not in there?
Let's see, is Steve still here that can? I can see it in the agenda packet, so I'm just not sure.
Yeah, I got that, March one.
Angie, I'm happy to share my screen too, if that's helpful.
Let's see. Yeah, I think that works fine. Yeah.
That'd be fine.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
Okay. So Chris Harris is on the phone. He's in our portfolio strategies group.
Oh, thank you. Chris Harris is on the phone. He's in our portfolio strategies group. And I'm going to have him start, just kind of give a high-level economic update, and then I will talk a little bit more specific to your portfolio.
Great. Thanks, Angie. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to share my screen. this is a fourth quarter of 24 and a first quarter of 25 update, but frankly, the world is so different today relative to where we were on April 2nd that we actually prepared a supplemental market update to walk through with a little more timely information. So I'm gonna run through that quickly and then turn it over to Angie, as Angie said, to walk through the portfolio specifics. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So the major theme today really is uncertainty from both a trade policy perspective and a Federal Reserve policy perspective. So starting with trade policy, what the chart on this page here shows is how the effective tariff rate has changed over the past roughly 4 months. So since February, we've gone from an effective tariff rate of about 3.7% to a rate in the mid-20s during the height of the tariff volatility in April, to now down to a rate that's in the mid-teens. This is still a pretty material increase relative to the, call it, mid 2% range that we saw over the past roughly 40 years. And the market is still really trying to figure out the impact of these higher tariffs on both growth and inflation. All of this uncertainty is impacting business and consumer sentiment, and there are concerns that this will impact consumption and growth going forward. We've actually started to see businesses comment recently in some survey-based measures that they're not willing to make capital expenditures or investments due to all of this uncertainty. However, we're still kind of in this area where the data are being viewed as backwards looking, not really reflecting the tariff impacts, although the expectation is that we may start to see this within the next month or two as we start getting data from both April and May. On this page here, part of the reason why we haven't seen the data reflect tariff impacts is because companies really built up excess inventories during the first quarter of 2025 in anticipation of tariffs. And as those excess inventories are depleted, the expectation is that we'll start to see prices rise with it. The chart on the right shows contributors and detractors to first quarter GDP by component, with the headline figure being shown with the blue line. And the economy contracted by 0.2% in the first quarter, largely because of companies pulling forward consumption in advance of tariffs. We can really see this with the net export figure in green, which reduced GDP growth by nearly 5%, but also the buildup of inventories I referred to a moment or two ago, which actually added 2.6% to GDP. So take all these numbers together, and what we saw is the economy contract by 0.2% during the first quarter. What's not known is how much of this will be reversed in future quarters, because a lot of this that you're seeing on this page here is a bit of an anomaly and a bit of a one-off. But even if the economy does contract again in the second quarter, that doesn't necessarily mean that we are in a recession. And the reason why is shown on the left side of the page, which shows the National Bureau of Economic Research's criteria to date a recession. So the NBER looks at what's referred to as 3 Ds: depth, duration, and diffusion, in determining if we're in a recession. At this point, we have depth. We had a contraction in GDP, but we don't have duration because it's only been 1 quarter. And frankly, we don't really have diffusion. And what I mean by that is there are certainly segments in the economy that are floundering, thinking about the manufacturing sector, thinking about housing. But really the bulk of the weakness we saw in the first quarter was because of that net export figure, as opposed to either the labor market or the consumer. Tariffs do complicate the Fed's job, though, which we show on this page here. The chart on the top left looks at contributions to the month-over-month change in core inflation, which basically looks at inflation less the impact of the volatile food and energy components. So the recent inflation prints have been quite tame. You can actually see them coming down over the past few months relative to where they were at the beginning of the year. But the chart on the top right shows economists' forecasts are generally calling for inflation to peak by the third quarter of this year before steadily coming down into next year. This also shows that the temporary nature of inflation that could be caused by tariffs, because we see the price level increase over the next few quarters as inventory is depleted and higher goods costs are passed along before, again, eventually expected to settle down. All things considered, though, the labor market is still on solid footing at this point, which we show on the bottom left with the monthly change in non-farm payrolls. We continue to see strong prints, including healthcare and education hiring in the kind of the light blue area that you see here. And the reason why we're highlighting that is it's worth keeping an eye on because of some of the federal funding cuts and those potential impacts on hiring plans in that sector. We do get the next jobs report on Friday. The expectation is that the unemployment rate will remain unchanged at 4.2%. But as the chart on the bottom right shows, economists' forecasts are for the unemployment rate in light blue to rise to 4.6% by the end of the year and 4.7% by March of next year. Certainly higher than the 3.5% trough that we see in March of 2023, but still quite low from a historic perspective. So the big question here is, to what extent are tariffs going to impact the labor market? Are we going to see this continuation of the trend where businesses hoarded workers like they did immediately after and during the COVID recovery period for fear that there will be shortfalls? Or are we going to see businesses start to reduce headcounts because of higher costs? Last thing I want to touch on before I stop for questions and ultimately turn it over to Angie is looking at yields and Fed expectations. So the left side of this page looks at the 2-year Treasury yield since April 1st, which does show volatility coming down. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the chart on the left, it's showing the intraday trading range of the 2-year Treasury, with the yellow dots showing where the 2-year yield ended the day. You can see this pretty steep drop here in April as the markets reacted to the tariff rollouts that were significantly above expectations, but then a bit of a recovery on the China-US trade agreement, or temporary trade agreement, I should say. And today, the 2-year Treasury is roughly equal to where it was on April 1st. So comparing the dot here to the dot here, it's at roughly the same spot. Yields on longer-term Treasuries, 10 and 30-year Treasuries, though, which we don't show here, those are higher, in part because investors are demanding more yield to lock in investments further out the curve. The chart on the right shows the number of implied 25 basis point cuts by the Federal Reserve for 2025. So what is the market expectation for the overnight rate? And this also showed some heightened volatility after the tariff rollout, but a pretty clear move lower, again, after the China-US partial or temporary trade agreement. Right now, the market's pricing in 2 25 basis point rate cuts for the year, with the first full rate cut occurring in September or October, which we think at this point is about right. That sounds about right for us. From the Fed's perspective, it does see downside risks to employment as well as growth, and upside risks to inflation. And it's really this tension between the two that highlights the complication and the difficulty that it's going to have in determining the policy response. Reason being is that if you have a slowdown in consumption that leads to weakness in the labor market, that typically requires the Fed to cut interest rates, but higher inflation typically requires the Fed to keep interest rates unchanged. And at this point, we just don't know which way the data is going to break. And as such, the Fed is going to continue to be on hold through the summer as it waits to see the impact of tariffs on the economy. So I'm going to stop there and see if there are any questions I can answer. I know we kind of breezed through it. I want to be sensitive to your time, but hopefully this gives a little bit of insight into what we're thinking about from the perspective of the economy.
So, Christopher, just a question from your perspective. So we've come out of a number of years where we had an inverted yield curve, and now we're back into a more traditional yield curve. You don't have anything that would indicate we're likely to turn back the other way, do you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I think the expectation is that we will see lower yields as the Fed does resume its cutting cycle. But at this point right now, the market is, the really short end of the curve is more drawn to the current level of the Fed funds rate, which is why short rates are marginally higher than rates further out the curve. But our expectation is that we will see the yield curve disinvert and return to normal upward sloping.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Thanks for the question.
Okay.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can switch presentations. And
Chris, if you can go to page 23.
23.
Most all of this stuff is all stuff that Chris covered, but the updated version. All right, so first of all, I'm not sure how many of you have been to these before, but Nick Kinney was previously here, the one here presenting. So I'm Angie Hughes. I'm relatively new to MOSIP as far as working here. However, I was at Platte County School District as their CFO, so I've worked with MOSIP in that capacity on the other side for a little over 10 years. Joined MOSIP about a year and a half ago. Nick is still with us. He just happens to be sick today, so I told him to keep his germs away from us. I didn't want him, he was going to be here, but I told him not to join us. So I actually live in Kearney, so just right down the road. He is in Columbia. We both kind of, tag team this, I guess, but I am here local in the event that anything is needed. So just wanted to give you that information. And then, so here on slide 23, you see the portfolio in total. It's right now, this is as of 3/31. As of today, it's right just about steady with that amount. It hasn't really changed much to that 121 million. Okay, if you go to slide 26. All right, so basically, in summary, the easy way to say this is you guys are invested 99% in AA plus investments, 90% in treasuries. So very, very safe securities and relatively short term. You see there the portfolio effective duration is 2.1. So, about half of the investments are in that 1 to 2 year range. So relatively short, very high quality, and mostly in treasuries. So very, very safe securities. Chris, I'm going to have you join in here. We have seen, or chime in here, we've seen some value in commercial paper. I know that's not something you guys have historically done, but I wanted Chris to kind of chime in on the value of that and kind of what that looks like if you were to maybe decide to do that going forward.
Yeah, so commercial paper is short investments. Typically, we're looking in the kind of the 3 to 9 month area of the yield curve. It is the unsecured promissory notes of the underlying issuer, which is really just a fancy way of saying it's a type of short duration corporate debt. The securities that we would purchase are rated A1 and A1 plus, and they offer roughly 15 to 25 basis points of incremental yield versus treasury securities. We have a pretty rigorous, well-defined credit review process with an independent credit team that monitors all of the issuers that are on our approved list. And we have pretty strict diversification requirements to make sure that we're not overly invested in any one issuer of commercial paper. So the idea here is that it's a way for you to generate some additional yield in the portfolio by purchasing securities that do have a higher yield for what we think it is an appropriate amount of additional credit risk.
Thank you. The only other thing I want to point out on this slide is you'll notice there your effective duration is just slightly below the benchmark effective duration. And if you go to slide 26, Chris.
Is that this one?
Oh, sorry. Okay. 28, sorry. If you see here, the difference in September to December, really what's causing that is in September, you guys had a lot of money just sitting in cash. The previous staff didn't invest that. And so then by December, we did get that invested. So that duration, the portfolio duration being a little bit less than benchmark is a result of quite a bit of money sitting in cash. So it's still earning interest. It's just not earning any unrealized gains. You know, there's no change in the market value when it's sitting in cash. So that's the difference, really, September to December timeframe, if you're wondering why that big decrease there in that yellowish color. And if you go to slide 30, okay, so here you'll see your earnings. You have your 3-month earnings, and then it breaks it down by 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, and then since inception. So at your 3-month, you've earned just over $770,000, so not too bad. But if you look out since inception, it's just over $16 million in interest earnings. And then you can see the 1, 3, and 5 years there as well. That change in market value line, if you look at the 3-year versus the 1 year, that's where you're going to see, you know, you don't have the 1.3 versus 3 million. You don't have that much in change in value because a lot of that was sitting in cash back in September. So just kind of and if you look down towards the bottom, the total return, your portfolio was earning at the 3-month mark just slightly less than the benchmark. And that's part of that because total return is interest plus your change in value. So when you have a lot of money not having any change in value, your total return is going to be a little bit less. But if you look out at like the 3 and 5 year, and then since inception, you guys' portfolio is outperforming the benchmark. So now that we have that invested, this next quarter, you should see that come, you know, right back to where it was prior to that money sitting in cash.
And just to make sure I'm understanding, so why was that so much in cash?
Nancy, I don't know if you want to speak to this or.
I believe that previous finance director was kind of keeping it in the cash in relation to possibly some capital type of items that we might have to dip into those funds for. So to keep them in a free basis. But after Melissa and I, you know, started our meetings with PFM, we turned that back around to go ahead and have that invested. Because we have plenty of cash if we really needed to dip into cash in our regular bank account. So we wanted to get the investments back on track and make sure we're getting, you know, what we can get for it.
Okay, great. And maybe this is a good time to ask another question. Could one of you speak to, so, you know, I think if we have citizens watching this, they may be looking at this and thinking, well, you know, why aren't you invested like I am in my 401k or something to that effect? Can you speak to kind of what our limitations are relative to our investment options and what we're legally bound to do?
Yeah, Chris, I can start this. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Just for the big picture for folks that may not understand that.
Sure. Chris, you may be better able to do this, but I mean, bottom line, you're dealing with taxpayer dollars. You need to be very, very safe, follow state statute. So there are certain things that you aren't able to invest in just because of the risk of those. Chris, I don't know if you want to go into any more detail.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So because these are operating funds and because state statutes are relatively restrictive, we don't have the ability to buy equities. We don't have the ability to buy anything really risky, which is why you see the majority of the portfolio, you know, has always been invested in government securities like treasuries and federal agencies. That's really designed to make sure that we're not, you know, taking too much risk with, you know, with taxpayer monies.
Right, that's what I just wanted to make sure people understood, that can't buy stocks, can't buy
Exactly.
high yield bonds, you
Correct.
can't buy things of that nature.
Correct. Yep, you're absolutely right.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? So we will obviously work with Melissa and Nancy, you know, any changes that you guys would like to see to this portfolio, we'll work with them to do that. We also wanted to touch base with you guys and kind of see going forward, we would like to get on a more regular cadence with these meetings. So I'm happy to come quarterly. I'm happy to come once a year, twice a year, whatever you guys would like to see happen. And then also kind of timing of those. Do you want it following your fiscal year end? Do you want it following calendar year end? What would you guys prefer?
City manager, do you have any thoughts relative to that? I do, but I'm just thinking or Melissa?
I'm going to defer to the finance director just since they're closer to the action.
I mean, I think previous organizations and what this organization has always done is an annual meeting. So we have quarterly meetings with them. So of course, if there's anything that ever needs to be brought to you, we can always communicate that with you. I probably tend more towards like an annual meeting. Maybe we do something after the follow-up of the fiscal year, but we can always do calendar year if that makes more sense to you too. Or, you know, I've been on the fence annually or even maybe every 6 months just because it is a little bit more volatile right now. Things are changing quickly. So I think either of those are a good option.
Yeah, I was kind of, as my thought was, as we, because of the volatility in the markets right now, and it is a little bit interesting. And we do have, you know, a number of things going on here at the city. Maybe semi-annually would be good for a little. We meet roughly every 3 months, and so, you know, that'd be every other time, and take a look at that here for maybe at least for the next year. You know. And I would think after, when we get our fiscal year closed, and then after year end, it would.
Sure. So we can maybe plan. I don't know how quickly you can turn around presentations and final, but we'll plan on maybe February having them come back, and then we can look at, you know, maybe August.
When's your
meetings.
yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
When's your February meeting?
We don't have it.
You don't have
We don't have
yet?
it set
Okay.
yet. Yeah.
All right. But we can chat about that and
Okay.
make sure we're on the same page. But that sounds good.
That sound good to the rest of the committee? Okay.
Well, thank you all. We appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
It's how we manage those funds is very important. Okay, next thing on the agenda is the street improvements sales tax, and I know this is coming out of the street tax committee, that they are asking for the council to weigh in on how much labor can be included in different things. I don't know who wants to tee this off, Mr. City Manager.
I'll quickly tee it off, and then what I think would be appropriate is to defer to the city attorney then to review the memo that he shared with the committee. So as you said, Council Member Fears, the half-cent sales tax approved by voters and made perpetual has an oversight committee, as do all of our sales taxes. Some members of that committee have expressed concern about the city staff's application of a provision in there that no more than 8% of the funds can be utilized to cover the costs of staff salary and benefits. Our interpretation and understanding and parlaying that out, application of that, we believe to conform with that, but again, there's been some concerns raised, and as you so well put it, the chairman during his biannual presentation just asked for the council to weigh in, so it's kind of firmly decided once and for all which direction we want to go and how we want to apply our policies here. So with that framing, I'm going to ask the city attorney to share his perspective. I'd also like to note that Deputy City Manager Lisa Reynolds is here in case you do have any operational questions for her as well.
Thank you. So included in your packet today was a legal opinion that I wrote, dated July 3rd, 2024. So it's from last summer, but it was included with the presentation from the committee, and then at their request, in order to have it here today, is included in your packet. So the key provision that we're looking at relates to the ordinance that put the sales tax on the ballot. And it says, if approved, no more than 8% of annual revenues from the transportation sales tax will be expended for operating expenses. So operating expenses is the key term there, because that's not defined there, and it's not defined anywhere that is binding on what we're doing here. And so I think that the issue is that staff has developed one interpretation and practice related to that, and the committee, at least or some members of the committee, I'm not exactly sure, have a difference in opinion on that. Yeah, and so it's a very short memo, but essentially, so I'll read the applicable part, which is, in this case, I would consider labor and materials, including salaries related to construction, maintenance, and repair of streets, sidewalks, curbs, bridges, culverts, and traffic signals, to all be part of the core functions of the transportation sales tax program and not part of operating expenses. However, I would consider labor materials related to the administration of the core functions, i.e. salaries for administrative personnel, office supplies, etc., to be part of the operating expenses and subject to the 8% cap. So in other words, some salaries and benefits are considered operating expenses if they relate to administration of the department. However, it relates to the core functions, the actual people doing the real work, let's be honest, then that, in my opinion, is not operating expenses, because that is that's the whole point of what that sales tax is for, in my opinion, is to fund those core functions. And therefore, it doesn't make sense to me that you would limit that, because if you limit that to 8%, I mean, again, without people, then you can have a whole, pile of asphalt? No. Sure. Pile of asphalt, or, any sorts of materials that you could buy with this, but without people to do something with them, they're just going to sit there. And so, again, in my opinion, that's why if it relates to that core functions, then it's not operating expenses, and therefore would not be subject to the 8% cap. So happy to take any questions.
Heather?
I agree with that. I think it's been asked and answered.
So in your perspective, what you're essentially saying is that that part is what I would term more overhead, as opposed to the actual primary purpose of the function.
That would definitely be another word you could use for that. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So operating expenses could be considered like overhead John, do you want to weigh in on this?
Sure, I'll concur with the discussion here. I'll concur with our city attorney's legal opinion. I've had the privilege of having some sidebar conversations over the last year regarding this. I think we can put this issue to rest. I believe we can do it here at the Audit Finance level, or are we wanting to take it back to the full body for discussion? I believe we can just put this issue to rest once and for all here.
If we can, then I'm certainly in agreement that it doesn't make any sense to have a whole pile of asphalt and nobody to put it down, and so that would be, I think this committee is in agreement.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Also, I'll put the input in as well that the committee that was bringing this forth was not a full body of consensus whatsoever.
Right, I gathered that as well, that they did not have full consensus on that committee. So I think they've asked for our opinion. I guess my question, and I'm not sure whether Lisa, you or Zach or somebody has had more comment or conversation with them relative to, do you feel like this needs to go before the full council, or can we make that decision here?
It would be my opinion that it's satisfactory to address it at this level. This committee's been set up as an extension of the council to specialize in oversight of the city's finances, of which this is exactly what we're talking about. So I think you're already empowered to make those kind of representations and decisions, and I don't see a need to clutter your already busy agenda with additional business.
Okay, so I guess I'm going to look to John and Heather. Do one of you want to make a motion to that effect so that we kind of put it on permanent, on record?
I'll make a motion to approve the Jeremy Cover City Councilor's recommendation review of the using transportation sales tax funds to pay for salaries.
Okay,
I second.
all right. Any
Chairman, I'll be more than
further
happy
discussion?
Sorry, Chairman, I'll be more than happy to speak to Councilman Stewart, who is the liaison to this committee as well.
Okay, that'd be great. All right, well, how do we call a roll in here? don't know that we've ever done that since I've been here. Um,
You say, how do we or why don't we?
Yeah, how do we? Do we do it by,
Oh, how do you, you can just do it by voice vote. If you all want to, yeah, just,
we can just vote aye?
yeah.
Okay,
Yes,
all in favor of this motion, say aye.
I
Anyone opposed? All right, we are in full agreement, so. Please, I'll let you communicate to Councilman Stewart, and if there's any need to communicate anything in writing or anything from this committee, let me know, and I'll be happy to do that as well. All right, that takes us to risk management and workers' compensation update. City Manager, I'm gonna see if you or who wants to lead this off.
I'm gonna kind of kick things off, but I do also want to bring in our Director of Finance. She's got some additional information and somewhat timely participated in a webinar put on by the Missouri Municipal League yesterday that for me was reassuring in the sense that the issues we're dealing with aren't isolated to Independence. They're statewide and national, in fact. So what we're talking about here, for everybody's benefit, risk management is kind of an all-encompassing term that we use here at the city to talk about prevention of injury to our employees, as well as the protection of the assets that we have at the city, things like vehicles, equipment, et cetera. But just like as a private citizen, if you were to get injured, you're going to incur certain medical bills, particularly if it's on the job, your employer is going to incur those. If you wreck a vehicle, your insurance premiums are going to increase as a result. So when we're talking about risk management, it's really mitigating against those things so that the city's insurance costs aren't escalating. If they do, then that's taking away financial resources that could be applied to the basic services for which we've been organized and we exist. Unfortunately, in recent years, the city has experienced quite a spike in our risk management cost. In fact, since 2016, just in our excess workers' compensation, so not our automobile liabilities or anything like that, but just in our excess workers' compensation premiums, those have increased by 190%. So we have significant dollars that are being applied just to pay for premiums and not, again, service delivery or anything of that nature.
That's what year again? Say that.
Since 2016.
So 9 years.
9 years, yes, sir. To further highlight that, if you were to jump back about 5 years ago, fiscal year 2019, the city had 14 liability claims. If you jump ahead just 1 year, then into fiscal year 20, that jumped to 58 claims. So from 14 to 58, that's a 314% increase. That's attention getting. So you start to drill down into that and you say, where is that happening? Police department, of course, you know, they are a very active department, lots of contact with the public, very physical nature to their job. In that 1 year period from 19 to 20, their claims rose from 5 to 15. What was then known as our Public Works Department, which is now part of Municipal Services, those claims rose from 6 to 21. Parks, which had 0 the previous year, added in 6 new claims that year. So we have seen this accelerated trend, more and more of our departments experiencing these claims, which is then, of course, contributing to this increase in premiums that I'm speaking to. Contrast that against our Power and Light department, who in that same 1 year period saw an increase in claims from 2 in 2019 to 3 in 2020. Now, there's probably a couple reasons you could attribute to that, but what I believe to be the primary one is our Power and Light department has had a dedicated risk manager, safety coordinator person in their department. And that's more than just a person that's coming around straw bossing you, telling you what to do or what not to do. But daily, they are focused on developing a mindset and an organizational culture that preaches and practices safety. So that becomes just part of your stream of consciousness about how you approach your job every day. Now, I don't have to tell all of you, I know you well know, but I'll share for those watching's benefit. For too many years, in my opinion, our organization has operated in a culture of haves and have-nots. Our Power and Light department, because they are a rate-funded entity, has had the financial resources to dedicate towards that risk management position. So today, in our city, we have 2 risk management safety coordinator positions. The one in Power and Light I'm speaking to, and very recently, our Municipal Services Department, which contains 2 of our 3 utility departments, water and sewer. Those are the only 2 places that have had the financial resources to focus on risk management. Meanwhile, we are seeing this enormous acceleration in claims and associated costs in our other departments. So if you watched the council meeting Monday night, you saw an amendment to the proposed budget offered by Councilmember Fears, which reallocated funding in the budget and embedded those resources associated with risk management and safety into the finance department. We identified the finance department because that is a citywide focus, and we believe this is a citywide problem that needs a citywide approach. Our thought process is that we aren't taking away from the focus of Power and Light, or in this case, the Municipal Services Department, but we are broadening what I referred to earlier as that mindset shift and cultural training. Because what we want is, let's say the safety person left to seek employment somewhere else, or they were out on an extended leave. The safety of our employees shouldn't be tied to, as I said, somebody coming around straw bossing you or look over your shoulder. It should be a mindset that every day you are thinking and practicing just second nature. So that's what's been proposed. That's the problem that we are facing and trying to address, so that again, those limited resources we have can be reinvested into things that better the quality of life in our community and aren't going towards overhead expenses. If it would be appropriate, Mr. Chair, I would then defer to the finance director with some of that additional information that she's gleaned from yesterday's webinar.
Sure.
So yesterday I attended the webinar. It was presented by the Missouri Municipal League, and then they had Higginbotham Public Sector, which is an insurance broker that was there to provide some information. And what I learned from this is that City of Independence is facing a 2-factor issue when it comes to our insurance premiums. So the first one is that we do have some significant losses that have occurred over the past several years, as Mr. Walker pointed out. But also there are broader industry trends, for insurance that are causing costs to go up as well. So for instance, they pointed out that between 22 and 23, the insurance industry faced a combined loss of $26 billion. And so when they are going out and quoting policy amounts now, which the city purchases excess amounts for our liability and our workers' comp, they're trying to make up for some of those losses that occurred. And so especially on the property insurance side, there's a lot of claims that are related to weather events, vehicle crashes. It costs more to repair cars. And so there are a lot of factors that we are looking at right now. It also pointed to underwriting pressures. So for example, carriers are taking more of a look at the properties that you have. Do you have maintenance plans in place for your properties? Are you making sure that your roofs are in good repair, that your windows are in good repair, that you don't have people going into empty buildings that might set them on fire or otherwise destroy them or cause liability issues? They also gave us some context on things like law enforcement. So law enforcement is increasing all across the board. Casualty insurance is up 10%. And then whenever you look, combine that with workers' comp, you're looking at a 14% increase. Auto liability and excess liability have been increasing steadily. So they pointed with the excess liability that there have been more frequent nuclear verdicts, as they put it. So handing out these large judgments in liability cases that are further driving up those costs. They said 21% year over year increase in that. And then one area that I think we can point to and that the city has experienced comes with cybersecurity. So realistically, cybersecurity is staying steady or even decreasing in some instances, and they pointed that there to one practice that you can put in place that can greatly reduce your liability there, and that is multi-factor authentication, which the city has in place. Some other key takeaways that they talked about that could help reduce our costs going forward: implementing or strengthening safety policies and training for employees, which is exactly what we're aiming to do. Conduct regular inspections of city infrastructure and document repairs. Enforce proper documentation for maintenance and incident response. Pass an ordinance or implement operational changes that limit the city's liability. So I thought this was interesting following the conversation around metal detecting in city parks and whether we should allow it or not, because this tells me no.
Somebody might leave a hole there, we could fall.
Yeah. And then enforcing stronger contractual risk transfer clauses. So this is something that, we would look towards Jeremy for, as well as that addition of that contract manager that we have been talking about adding next year in the budget. So, there are things that we can do. There are things that we're going to see costs go up that we can't control. Next Monday, we will have Charles Worth Consulting come in, and they're going to talk about our workers' comp and walk you through. You're going to see an increase in our self-insured retention rate for some city employees, some sectors of city employees for police, fire, and IPL. And then on the June 16th meeting as well, we're going to have, we'll be bringing forward our insurance renewals. That's going to cover our property liability, utility property, and then the workers' compensation.
Okay. So the goal is really to make risk management not a silo function for two departments, but to make it look at the city as a whole, and look at, and it may need, over time, it may need additional resources and other things that to come and play with that, but it doesn't make, what our discussion has been is it doesn't make sense to look at risk management through, a microscope, but look at it broadly for the whole city. So, okay, any questions anybody has? All right.
I do, Mr. Chairman.
You bet.
Thank you. This is, I guess, maybe more for the city manager. With the risk manager, one person, is he going to be able to work with all of the different departments? I mean, they're all different. I mean, PD's different from FD to IPL, community development.
So we're actually, the budget amendment that was adopted, and then assuming the budget's adopted as proposed on the 16th, that would embed these two, there would be two positions. There would be the current Independence Power and Light risk manager, safety coordinator, as well as the one that is in the municipal services department. And then our hope and intent over time is to, as needed, if needed, grow that function. As you say, there's probably some industry specific things there, particularly with those public safety departments, but there are other things that overlap, whether you're a firefighter or a laborer, there's safety practices to lifting things so you don't jack up your back. So we would probably, my hope is, I obviously don't want to overpromise, but to broaden that focus and function over time. But right now we'll have two individuals who are working at a citywide level.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. If there's not any additional questions on that item, we'll move to our fourth item under new business, which is monthly financial update. I'm assuming Melissa or maybe Nancy, one of you want to enlighten us here.
Yeah, I will kick it off. So I wanted to start with the financial overview that we've put on front of the financials. We started doing that at the beginning of the year. And I was just looking for, I guess, feedback from you all. If that is something that is helpful that you would like us to continue doing, is there something different that you would like for us to do with that? Because I ask this because as I come in here, I don't necessarily have anything to add to what was there. Happy to point out some things that I think are important in it. As well as maybe talk through some trends that I'm seeing with sales taxes. So since we've done this, we have got our new sales tax reports, and I did just some quick analysis on it to look at how things are trending. Because general fund, as I'm looking at that, the general fund sales taxes are trending a little bit lower than what we'd like to see to budget. The fund balance, unrestricted fund balance at this point is sitting at 16% of what our projected revenues are. I do think on the expenditure side that I know on the expenditure side that now that we started collecting the Prop PD sales tax, that we're going to see some expenses offset there once we get to the end of the year. We've just collected those for a few months, and there's not really an amount of money yet there that we can use to offset those salary increases. So I would expect that general fund, unreserved fund balance will tick back up once we can do that. Aside from that, sales tax, it's still trending down slightly. When I look at it at business activity month, it's hovering between a 0.5% decrease to, I think this month it ticked up a little bit to a 0.7% decrease. But one of the things that I see with that is as we continue to collect sales taxes going forward, I will still be putting that money back in there. So it's relatively steady at that decrease. I don't see us going off a cliff at this point with the sales taxes. Obviously, it's something that we have to watch as new tariffs are announced, as things at a national level occur. We have to continue watching that. One of the things that I'm certainly most interested in, I continue to see growth in the use tax, which helps offset some of that decrease in the sales tax, although it doesn't make up for all of it.
Working in the grocery business, it's a weird time all the way across the board. There's a lot of ups and downs for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you for keeping an eye on that. I would say, as we're doing these presentations, when you're looking, just kind of see what you're seeing in the trends and what's taking place.
Yeah. And ideally, we have a new accounting manager that will be starting next week. Once that person is in place, we're hoping that they can, take some duties off of Nancy, help her free up a little bit of time, and then we can start looking at more of these economic type reports. I've shared with, Assistant City Manager DeSalle that I think there are some things that we can do on economic development side that might be able to assist them, so that as we're looking at, who should we be looking to market to, where do we have gaps in our economy, that type of thing, that hopefully we can help to augment some of that and, increase some of that revenue. Same thing with the development of the CVB, helping on the tourism side, getting them some data that will help drive, drive growth in that sector as well.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Now you're speaking my language with redevelopment when we've had some real low level paper napkin kind of conversations about how can we develop, Northwest Independence, and that kind of fits into that.
Yep. Getting staff in place is going to be key for that, but I'm hopeful that we're going to be in a place that we will be able to turn our attention to that.
Well, I'll just give you a little feedback in that I think this high-level overview is real helpful, and for you to bring just, whatever you see as you think is most important for us to, in terms of a presentation format, whatever you think is most helpful. I think what you're seeing in the way of trends or things that stand out in the reports, and then we can obviously go through and look at things in more detail and ask you questions like I'm probably going to here in a couple minutes.
Okay.
You ready for that?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, all right. Well, hang on, I gotta make my computer work here. So in the general fund, got to make it a little bit bigger so I can actually read it. I'm on what page am I on? page 1. So we're at about, this is as of end of April, we're at about 1.2 million in expenses over revenues. And I guess I just was curious as to whether you think that trend is going to continue or whether you, and you kind of answered that, I think, with the Prop PD piece. That's what I was kind of looking at.
That's part of it. We have, I
I'm
think,
on page 1 of the financial report. Part of it.
that's part of it. Part of it is use tax receipts, so we don't start receiving those until later in the year, and then that kind of builds up some of the revenue there. There are things like on the sides of pilot where once you get into the warmer months, that starts to go up, and it helps to offset. In our budgetary projections, and I haven't looked again since the close of the last month, but I did expect us to, revenues to exceed expenditures. So it is something that we watch. Obviously, it's a pretty important trend, and there's just some other adjustments that are coming to. I don't think we took. I know city manager looks like it's over budget, but there was an issue going on with some of the ways that salaries were being allocated out that was incorrect, and so that will be adjusted. I think there was one other area that had an issue like that as well. So we'll see some adjustments going forward. That right now it's a fine line.
Right.
We're not enjoying as much revenue growth as we did in the past couple of years with use tax, and so it's just not as rosy of a picture as it was last year.
Okay. Let's see, now I'm on page, I'm looking at the rental rehabilitation fund. And that one, was noticing that our revenues were about 270,000, expenses were, can't read that, too small. Expenses were 3,124,000, so we're about 2.8 in the hole on that particular fund. Is that left over from previous years, or what is that? I'm just trying to understand a little better that discrepancy. So on the PDF,
Oh.
I'm on page 128.
CDBG. Where is that? Could that potentially be reimbursement?
Page 16 of your report, but 128 of the PDF.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll let you answer that.
Okay. So on the budgetary reports, that actual column includes what we've paid and then also open purchase orders or open encumbrances. So in this case, like if you look down towards the bottom, there is a current year encumbrance total of 2.8 million. And so that's included in your 3.1.
Okay.
So we include the encumbrances so we kind of know, what's coming, what we've set aside against budget. But then at the bottom, we kind of put that back in, so it does have a zero fund balance
I see.
altogether.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's
Yep.
helpful.
Yes.
All right. See if I had one other thing or if that. Oh, I was just wondering on the Power and Light Fund. So right now we're sitting, we have a lot of make my computer work a little better. We have a lot of capital items and things down at the bottom there. And so right now we're sitting at non-restricted resources available of about 33 million. I'm trying to recall what our target is for that. And I'm just kind of wondering how we're gonna.
Councilmember, if you can give us just a minute, each of our utility funds has kind of an industry-specific target, and the deputy city manager's calling that up.
I remember seeing it, I just can't
Yeah.
recall what it is, and I couldn't really find it anywhere to my fingertips, and so. Because the ending available resources was 86 million, but then when you pull all the those reserved items out, it comes down to about 33, and I just was trying to remember.
Power and Light's targeted total reserve level is $52,500,000. So the percentage changes for each of the utility based on a host of things, risk levels, capital reserve available, working capital, and things like that. And we have buckets for all of those types of reserves, but the total for them is 52.5 million.
So does the 52.5 million correlate to the ending available resources of 86 million, or the non-restricted of 33?
It's part of the math in the total non-restricted. So basically, you look at the available total resources, and then we subtract out encumbrances and expenditures, all those things, and we also subtract out that targeted reserve, leaving the available non-restricted fund balance.
Okay, okay.
Which,
So-
as of the last PUAB report, was sitting at 39 million and change.
So we're well above our target then, so that's what I was trying to get at. I was trying to recall the detail on that. Okay, those were my questions. Anybody else have anything?
Melissa, I just, this annual comprehensive financial report was a lot, but it was super helpful for me, especially this time of year when I'm also looking over the budget. So I would love this going forward.
Yeah, and that's something we presented in January. I'm not sure how it got attached or why it was attached to this
Oh.
presentation. As much as proud as we are of the audit this year, it should not have been part of this packet. But we can provide you with a book too, so that you don't have just the loose pages, but we can get you an ACFR for this year.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay. Anything else on the monthly financial update? All right, last item on the printed agenda is fire updates. I'm not sure who's leading that discussion.
I will talk about that.
You might be.
So here at the city, we collect Spire payments as a convenience for citizens. They can either come into City Hall or they can come here to the IUC. But we just wanted to bring it to your attention that we've had a couple of issues come up with it. Number one, we do have a cost to the city that's associated with it, and that's what you see here on this document that we've prepared. That was through, it looks like March. So far, it's cost the city $11,500. Now, not a tremendous amount of money, but that is just through March. And then the other issue that we've had is we've run into some problems with the way that the deposits happen for this. And Nancy can speak in just a little bit more detail if you're interested in it. But there have been some times that we've just ran into some issues. So we wanted to bring it to you since this is something that is costing the city money and that there have been some ongoing problems to see if it's something that you want us to continue doing, or we would like to propose that perhaps once customer service moves to the new building, that it's not something that we continue to do. I think this issue maybe came up about a year ago or a little bit more at Audit and Finance, and you had requested to see this information. And so we're just now getting back around to be able to bring it to you.
So what this is telling us is that right now through March, it's cost us over and above what Spire gives us to collect the funds.
Yes.
It's cost the city an additional $11,555 to do that. And so I guess the council needs to think about, or, is it worth that to our citizens to provide that, or should we stop doing that? And you're saying the logical time, if we were to stop it, the logical time to do it would be when we move offices.
That's what we would propose, yes.
Thoughts among the committee?
Mr. Chairman, So if I'm looking, the payments at the IUC, that total number, those are total individuals or accounts that are coming to pay? Is that what that is?
Yes, over on the right-hand side, that would be the number of payments that IUC here is taking through customer service. So it is a high amount of, 6,600. Of course,
It
some of
is.
those are repeats. It might be the same customer coming in each month, right?
Sure.
But total for the 9 months was that. And then at City Hall, we take payments as well, but it's a much lower amount. A lot of times here, I think in customer service, somebody comes in to pay their utility bill. They also pay their Spire bill at the same time.
So if you were to guess, those repeats maybe cut in half, so about 3,000, probably, if you were to guess.
Hard to know.
Yeah, I mean, I think like
Yeah,
if we're
I
looking
get
at
it.
like the average, probably about 700 maybe customers a
Okay.
month-ish.
Okay. It's a service to provide, but obviously the numbers aren't adding up. Is there any way to speak to Spire just to see how that negotiation rate is? Or they just tell us to go
So this
pound
was
sand?
probably maybe 7 or 8 years ago. They changed their system, and so we had to open up our own Spire bank account where we deposit these funds for Spire when they come in. That earns a little bit of interest, and then basically they take those funds electronically out sometimes before it's really posted at the bank. And so that can cause some additional fees and things like that happen in the account. So we've had some issues with all of that. The fee that they give us is not very much, to cover everything. I guess it would maybe be something we could go back to them and maybe see if we can renegotiate a different fee.
Sounds like we're just really doing them a favor
Yeah.
than anything else. Okay.
Are there other places around town for people to pay those payments?
It seems like maybe did Hy-Vee or some place else also used to take payments, but I'm not sure.
I remember hearing something like that, but I'm not sure. I mean, we can try to find out and see, but
I guess my thought being is that I think two things before we land on this would be, one would be, it'd be nice to know if there are other places in town that people can go. That would be, I think, a good question. Another question would be, it's might be worth a phone call to Spire to say, right now, we're supplementing your program substantially. Do you want to help? Before we just pull the plug on it, do you want to give some thought to letting us recoup some more of our costs and see what they have to say? I mean, it is a nice service to people, and it makes it convenient for them. But I don't know that we need to supplement that. It would be my
yeah.
so.
And for me, what gives me heartburn is that we do supplement it, but also having the separate bank account that we have to keep an eye on, that we don't want it to get overdrawn, and then that all becomes, we would either have to put money over into it to keep it, and I don't think that's appropriate,
Right.
or it gets overdrawn and then we're stuck paying for it. So there's some issues going on.
Are we accounting for that bank account? We balancing it? So we're putting extra work into that side
Yes,
of it as
our
well.
finance department reconciles the bank account.
That cost isn't in here.
Yes, yeah.
So.
And so
Mr.
there's an amount in here for finances time that we've included. So we have finances time, community development's time, and utility customer service time.
I was just going to say, Mr. Chairman, we pulled up on Spire's website, and there are multiple, is the term I would use, locations, both in Independence and then throughout the metro for people
Where
to
people
pay their
can go
bill.
place.
Most of them are grocery stores.
Where people are going anyway.
Correct.
Right.
But yeah, grocery shops, convenience stores, snack shops, those seem to be the predominant location.
And so I guess, Mr. Heather, do you have a question first?
I mean, it's a service we offer that, and 700 people isn't a small amount. And they're probably used to paying their bill there. So, if we do decide to revise it, we need to give people lots of notice, lots of, tell them where to go. I think as much information as possible before we pull the plug.
Mr. Chairman, and I would add a good narrative on why we are, if we choose to do so, why we are doing so.
City manager, maybe a question would be is this a, management decision that you would make and we would, with our feedback, or is this something that needs to go to the council in the whole council? Can we do it here? What's your thought?
Based on some of the things I have seen in the past, let me work with the city clerk to make sure there wasn't some sort of enabling resolution that called for this or established it, because if that has happened, I think the appropriate thing to do would be to amend any practice via resolution. If not, I don't see a reason to entangle you with having to make a formal decision on that, but your input and advice on application of this would be greatly appreciated.
Well, my reaction would be that if we don't, if you want feedback from at least me, this council member, is that, I don't think we need to supplement Spire's, program. If they want to pay for it, then that would be different, but I don't think, that doesn't sound like they do. And so, my thought being is logical time is when we move. So let's start at the point in time, if you make that decision, let's start notifying people that utilize that service that this is going to stop as of X date, and here's why, and then go on. But if we need to bring it back to the council, then that's great too. So.
We'll research that and figure out the appropriate way to affect any changes that are decided upon.
That's just my feedback. I don't know if you all want to say anything else.
My quick 2 cents would be, as being sensitive to staff and having to deal with their Spire on that end, if we can possibly work out a better arrangement with them to see what the true cost would be, and shoot, it may be too cost prohibitive for the customer to pay, because it's $1.50 now, $1.25. So it could be just too cost prohibitive, perhaps, for the customer to use that. But it'd be worth a conversation to see if we can come up with a good agreement. But other than that, I would agree with you, Councilman Fears. The timing probably would work best that way.
We'll then, based on the feedback I've heard here, we will continue to explore this and work to exhaust every option to try to make this more palatable to the city before we affect any change. And certainly we'll communicate back at minimum with this body, and of course then the whole council with more information.
All right. Any other new business anyone has before?
None here.
Committee? If not, then do we have a date for our next meeting? Or proposed date for our next meeting? Bringing up my calendar here. Can't remember if we set one or not. Normally would have been in May, but we.
Like in September? August?
Looking at anybody that might know. Do you have any idea?
I mean, I think part of it is if we want to get back on kind
Back
of a
on track.
regular cadence, I would say probably September. I think by then our plan, I didn't mention this in the financial reports, but our plan is to have at least a preliminary like year-end report done by mid-August. So we could potentially discuss that at that point. And then I'm not sure if you would want PFM to come back in at that
So-
point or wait until next year to start that.
Good question. So normally we would have been in May, so 3 months would put us
In
at
August.
the end of August,
Okay.
right?
Do you have what we've done in the past. I think we might have gotten off a regular cadence at some point, so, I mean, it can be whatever we need it to be at this point, but. So March, okay.
Councilmember Fears, I'll just remind you guys, the ordinance establishing the committee requires you to meet at least 4 times per year. You can meet more often, but you have to meet at least 4 times a year. And so I think that's how you kind of fell into this quarterly cadence.
I'm looking at, so we had a meeting November of last year. We had a meeting June of last year. Meeting January of this year. And then March, June. So looks like we've been all over the place.
Yeah.
Well, what makes most sense to you, Melissa?
I would probably propose September.
Okay.
And then maybe we'll go quarterly from there. And then if we need to adjust, we can adjust as we go, so.
Okay. And we had been doing towards the end of the month.
Sure.
Is that what makes most sense from your perspective?
Yeah, I think so, especially with financial reports, for us to have time to get them completed, and then that way we can post them to the meetings.
September 24th?
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at here. Let me just get down. Yeah. September 24th work? All right.
Okay.
And then maybe just so that we can look a little bit longer term on our calendars, just want you kind of pencil out what makes the most sense to you, and then maybe we can talk about that at the next meeting.
Sure, we'll send a follow-up.
So for the
email.
next year, that way we
Okay.
got, kind of have it on our calendar and have it
Okay.
game plan.
So we like last Thursday of the month, then each quarter,
Makes sense.
they're about Wednesday. Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
sounds good. Okay, September 24th. And I'm sure somebody will send us a meeting invite for that, so. Okay, anything else for anybody has?
No?
If not, entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
A second?
All right. All in favor, aye.
All right.
Aye.
All right, we're good. We're out of here. Thank you, everyone. Thanks to everyone who presented and all the feedback.